bullish versus bearish, the CEO's approach. Well, let's look at this one. Oh, they call me the Hoskinator. And they say the Ripple CEO is Ned Flanders. Yeah, actually, let's talk about how CEOs are supposed to behave, especially if they want to be publicly traded companies. So today, something happened with Elon Musk. We don't know. I looked at his Twitter feed, and either Elon's been drinking, he's been taking some drugs, or his Twitter feed's been hacked, or he's just damn near lost it. You generally, as the CEO of a publicly traded company, who's led multiple publicly traded companies, PayPal and Tesla, you don't tweet that your stock is overpriced. There's a firewall between the CEO and the markets of your shares. And there's an expectation, both legal and social, by the regulators of every regulated market that's credible, that CEOs are supposed to behave in a certain way. And they are supposed to be very careful with the statements that they make. Now, there's a big spectrum of flexibility there. You, in many cases, have super conservative CEOs who are super careful with what they say, like the Bob Igers of the world, or Tim Cooks. They're not really going to go out there and say crazy shit. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have the Elon Musks, in some cases the Jack Welches. You have these CEOs who are, or Mark Cuban, who are very vocal, and they just have strong opinions about things that they share. And I'd like to consider myself in that set as well. I say things from my heart. I just say, hey guys, I'm going with my gut on this one, or this is what I believe and feel. And I don't go through a marketing department. I don't go through a communications department. I know a lot of Fortune 500 CEOs, and generally speaking, how they make statements is, on social media in particular, they don't even write their own tweets. They don't write any of their external communications. Basically, first, generally, it's some third party that writes everything. And in many cases, CEO doesn't even see it. He just basically gives consent to his chief of staff or executive assistant or somebody who knows him pretty well, will review those statements and say, yeah, they look in line with our philosophy, just send them out. So when you see a tweet or something from a CEO, it's been sanitized to a point where it's asinine. And even when a CEO does do something, generally what they do is when they do it, they write it and they send it to their PR people, their brand people, their external people. They read it, clean it up, then they focus group it. Will this piss off this interest group? Will Aborigines with this political ideology and and this sexual preference get angry at us if we say this? I mean, this is how crazy it gets. Is it PC? Is it not? And they sometimes argue for hours over the meaning of a particular word or how a sentence will read or something like that. It's extraordinary when you actually see this machinery up close and you see how it works and how people do these jobs. So those CEOs do this because they don't want to be seen as influencing the stock price. They don't want to create a controversy. At the end of the day, the story should be about the company, its goals, its vision, the products, the things it's doing. Generally speaking, especially with custodial CEOs, the story is not about the leader. It's not about the CEO. If the story is about the CEO, Tim Cook is doing his job poorly. Now, the founder CEO and the more aggressive CEOs, sometimes the story being about the CEO is actually quite advantageous to the company because people invest in the company or they buy the products of the company because they actually identify with the culture, philosophy, and vision of the particular leader of the firm. So this is where sanitizing is problematic because the minute you try to corporatize that person, you're effectively killing the reason why people identify with that brand. Frankly, this is what made Apple. Steve Jobs was a master storyteller. And what he did is he created a culture around Apple and said, hey, Apple, if you buy an Apple product, you're this kind of person. You agree with these types of things. You basically think different. It was their tagline for a long time. It would have been unimaginable to put Steve Jobs at that point in a suit and forced him to start speaking in corporate doublespeak and never commit to everything and just be vacuous and hollow. Everything that was Apple would die and be lost, and people say it's not our company anymore. And then suddenly the company would make no money. Why? Because they could no longer charge a 30 to 40% premium on the hardware that's identical to the hardware of their competitors. But it's just in a pretty box with a nice culture on it. It's the same for designer brands. If you look at Armani or any of these other extremely expensive brands, they carry with them unique cultures and vision and viewpoint. And you can't just simply sanitize that, because the very fact that it's unsanitized and real and legitimate is what gives that brand value. The danger of this, though, is that you live and die by the quality of the CEO, and you live and die by whether your CEO or whoever you've built this brand around stays a credible actor. For example, Papa John's Pizza. He's the founder of Papa John's, the face of Papa John's, apparently ran into some issues, and the company kicked him out. And now they're in this weird situation where the guy that basically created the company, was the face of the company, is gone. And they have to completely rebrand themselves, to completely rebuild themselves. The Papa John's is gone. To a lesser extent, McAfee antivirus. They have a situation where the actual McAfee has behaved in ways that some people would consider to be a madman. And certainly it's created a lot of chaos. And so when you carry the name of your founder and your founder's gone off the deep end, or at least people have perceived that, then it creates a little bit of concern of whether it actually helps or hinders the company's mission, its ability to execute. So Elon Musk recently said a lot of crazy tweets. I hope his account was hacked. If not, it's pretty clear that Musk is having a very serious time. His child is just about to be born. He's going through a very stressful period. Human beings are about to be launched into space for the first time in 9 years on an American rocket that his company has built. I can't imagine the level of stress that this guy is under, especially given that all of his production capacity is grinded to a halt as a consequence of a quarantine that he feels is fascist. So even if he hasn't gone crazy, the stress certainly is impacting his judgment. And just a simple tweet of saying the stock is overvalued has Tesla stock, I think, collapsed 10% just on that movement. So this is a problem. But at the end of the day, I think we've lived in an age where it's becoming less about what you say and more about your character and what you do and how you act. Would you rather a CEO always behave perfectly, say the perfect things, and then on the back end insider trade against you whenever he or she knows that the stock is not going to behave, or basically try to sell you products that they know are defective or harmful? And the reality is that for Fortune 1000 companies, that's all too common. We have a lot of Elizabeth Holmes out there. And just the ones we found are pretty concerning, and we all pretend like that was the exception to the rule. But frankly, there's a lot of predatory culture in many boardrooms across the United States. In my view, it's much more important to have a CEO who doesn't always say the right thing, but their heart is in the right place, and you have a personal relationship with them in that their word is their bond, and they know what the hell they're doing. And you understand that they're a calm leader who can navigate rough waters. I often say to my people that at the end of the day, a CEO only has 3 responsibilities in a company. The first responsibility is sustainable revenue. Stock markets don't reward that. In many cases, CEOs have to make a decision. Do I do something now that will flatline our revenue, but long-term make us very competitive in 5 or 10 years? Or do I do something now that will spike my revenue, but burn the company out or not make us competitive in 5 or 10 years? But then again, Wall Street will reward me for great quarterly profits. So I'll be punished for doing the right thing, but then I'll be rewarded for doing a perverse thing. That's a bad incentive. So a lot of CEOs, they just simply don't behave appropriately. So sustainable revenue is the first duty. It's the single most important duty, because if you don't do it, the company eventually goes under. Second, dealing with existential risk. So there's plenty of risk in a company, and there's plenty of people who wake up every day dealing with it. When you call in the CEO, greatest movie example of this would be Margin Call, where these traders discover that 2008 is going to happen, the whole markets are going to collapse. Once people confirm that this is indeed going to happen, the first person they call is the CEO. He flies in on a helicopter and says, "Okay, what's going on?" And then they all come up with a plan in a few hours to save the company. That's an existential risk, and there's many of them. And CEOs are always brought in to deal with that. And most CEOs who are good do those first two things well, and we reward them accordingly. The third thing is the Walt Disney effect, and people always get this one wrong: picking a proper successor. Every CEO has a duty to make sure that they have somebody around that if they get hit by a bus or decide they just don't want to do the job anymore, can take over for them and run the company as well or better than they could and carry on the vision of the organization. Disney did not do this. And to a lesser extent, Bill Gates did not do this. This is why Microsoft entered the Ballmer era. Ballmer was just a proxy of Gates and allowed him to enable his wildest fantasies while he ran off trying to save the world. Meanwhile, Microsoft year by year lost its dominance and competitiveness to an extent where the shareholders revolted, fired both Gates and Ballmer, and brought in Satya Nadella. It was a really tragic thing for him, but it was necessary for the company, and Nadella had to right the entire ship. So those are the three things a CEO has to do. And they have to do that in a regulated environment more often than not. And they have to do that where every word they say is going to be judged and monitored. And then they have to do that within the brand reality of the company. And they have to do that with varying degrees of mandates and power. Some CEOs are incredibly powerful, like Mark Zuckerberg. Other CEOs are not so powerful, like the CEO of HP. They have power, but there's certainly a strong board, and there's certainly activist shareholders, and there's a lot of institutional momentum in various ways. So you come in as a custodian, and your goal is to do no harm and manage the ship as well as you can, but you don't really have a lot of opportunity to carve your own name and initials into the system. So you have more freedom to say things. And the reality is that the guys at Ripple, they don't have as much freedom as I do. Getting to the point of this question, I am the guy at Input Output, for better or for worse, and I'm accountable to basically the success of this project. And I have a personal relationship with my community, and they sometimes give me a lot of slack to hang myself, a lot of rope to either hang myself or climb a mountain with. And some days I do put my foot in my mouth, but I'd like to believe that we all know that we're on the same side here. When you come in as the CEO of Ripple, especially at this stage in the company's evolution, the reality is Ripple has two things that they're attempting to do. One, make sure XRP is not a security and stabilize their business model. Two, conduct an IPO. If the CEO accomplishes that, he's going to be lavishly rewarded and make tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars over the next 5 years, get to be on the front cover of Forbes, gets all the accolades. And that's the definition of success there. It is not to be a crypto evangelist. It's not to go on Reddit or make these AMAs and tell people how we're going to go change the world. I'm a founder CEO. I started this company on a vision. I started this project on a vision. I'm going to keep doing this whether I'm rich or poor. I've spent all my money and we still haven't achieved the vision, then I'll just keep doing it because this is how I like to spend my life. I didn't sign up to go have a really nice job, make a lot of money, and then go retire and then, have grandkids sit on my lap and talk about how rich granddad is and, pay to get my kids into Harvard. I signed up to build stuff and change things and make things better and make things beautiful. I signed up because I've seen a lot of horrible things in the world. I've been to over 52 countries and some really bad ones like Sierra Leone, where the people are great, but the government sucks and they're laden with war and chaos, in some cases even Ebola. Not a good situation. And I've seen the best in people. I've seen forgiveness you wouldn't imagine. In Rwanda, I saw a Tutsi and a Hutu person who ate lunch together every day, who worked at the Genocide Museum, and the Hutu person killed the Tutsi person's family. I can't imagine eating lunch with someone that killed my family. But do that and call that person at least an acquaintance and understand them and where they came from in just 20 years. I've seen these things with my own eyes. And I say the world deserves better systems. The world deserves to be better. So this is why we don't run a company like Ripple. And this is why I do the things I do on a Friday night, go out live with you guys on YouTube and have a conversation with you, for better or for worse. And y'all rib me and we have a great conversation. Sometimes it's productive, sometimes it's not. I'm not going away. I'm going to keep being here, keep doing this. As long as I have a stage to stand on, I'll keep telling you the merits of what we do. And if we get it right, we change the world. If we don't get it right, we inspire somebody in our community to do it again and change the world. A great example of that would be 1964 with the Barry Goldwater campaign in the United States. Many of you will not even know who Barry Goldwater was. He ran for president and won the Republican nomination in 1964 and ran against Lyndon Baines Johnson. And what he's usually known for in politics is being crushed in a landslide against Lyndon Baines Johnson. People thought he was a bit of a crazy person. But he inspired at least one person during his run to really take politics so seriously that that person went on to be governor of California. And then that person went on to become the president of the United States. And that was Ronald Reagan. So the point of movements in philosophy is that the definition of success is to keep the torch lit, the idea alive, to keep the momentum going, the mission going. As Martin Luther King said, in the journey to the promised land, I might not get there with you, but we as a people will get there. And similarly, we as a movement will get there. And at the end of the day, because our goals are pure and our vision is pure and where we'd like to go is pure, we'll get there. Because who can debate with this and fight with us? Is it a bad idea to give each person in the world more control over their money, their financial freedom, to make sure that they can't become victims of waste, fraud, and abuse, corruption, unlawful government seizing of their assets? Is it debatable that people should have the certainty that when they vote, they know that their vote was properly recorded and there won't be retribution against them for voting the wrong way against a particular political party, and to know that they will always have the right to vote? Is it so wrong to know that when you own something that your property rights are going to be protected and they're transnational, and even if your country falls into a civil war, at least the world knows who really owns something? Is it so wrong to ask that you're treated with transparency and honesty in your commercial dealings? These, of course, are undebatable principles, and the point of our industry is creating tools to make these things and more things better for everybody. And we live in an age now where in the United States, military drones are being used to tell people to go back into their homes for quarantine. Governors have completely suspended the U.S. Constitution for our safety. We haven't seen something like this since the Civil War in 1861. It's an unprecedented time. And we tend to wonder, when there's not a lot of focus on the facts and circumstances of what led us into this, if it will ever actually completely end, or if these enumerated powers that have been expanded dramatically in the last few weeks will start sticking around longer than they should. You know, Vladimir Lenin had a great saying, sometimes decades go by and very little things happen, and sometimes in weeks, decades of stuff happens, to paraphrase him. And he's absolutely right. For a long time, since September 11th, America was on kind of a direction, and the world was in kind of a direction, but there was pushback, and people got comfortable with the flow. And in just a few short months, everything about our relationship with our government, our relationship with each other, our relationship with markets, how free markets should work, who should get to decide, they've all been called into question, and we've seen a hyper-centralization of power off of the excuse that it's saving lives. And of course, what happens if we don't have a vaccine? Very high probability of that if the virus continues to mutate. There's already 30 different strains of coronavirus. So if we can't get an effective vaccine, does that mean this is now an indefinite reality that we all live in, saying that we're here to save lives for your protection? So the point of the tools that we construct as an industry is that they are the antidote to tyranny. Because if the argument is that we want to save lives, we now have a way of doing that without requiring hyper-centralization of power around politicians, in many cases, who don't even follow the rules that they enforce. For example, the governor of Illinois wants to put his whole state in a lockdown and tell everybody they have to shelter in place, but his wife can go to the beach and go travel to Florida and have fun. And when you question him about it, he says, "How dare you bring my family into this?" It's a very simple matter. The rules don't apply to the people who rule us. Some people are more equal than others, and that's always been true throughout all of human history. So That's what our movement is about, and that's what I do as a CEO, is that I, from the bully pulpit and from the product line, every single day go and remind people that the products that we build as a company, the things we think about as a company, are all about philosophy, and ultimately are all about building new tools for the 21st century to better manage people throughout the years that come. Ripple's not that kind of company. They don't have that philosophy. They don't think this way. Their goal is to build the internet of value, and their goal is to make the existing system far more efficient and to create a better product for people like banks and governments and enterprise actors. And yes, this will carry a lot of consumer benefit. But at the end of the day, if a regulator comes in and tells them to substantially change the soul of their protocol and product, they'll just simply do it. If a regulator comes in and tells us to substantially change the soul of what we're building, I will resign as CEO of Input Output and alert everybody and warn everybody that this mandate has been given to us, and hopefully we can find a way that somebody in a different jurisdiction can continue the work. There's just simply things I'm just not going to do, and I really don't care about money. I've been rich and poor. It doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is the things that we do. So yeah, chill as fuck. No worries. Shelling incoming. Thanks for the question there, Crypto Deus. That was a good one. But actually, I like the Ripple guys. I think they sometimes do very questionable things, like put Ben Losky on their board. But I like David Schwartz, and I've liked Evan Thomas and all the other guys. Interledger Standard's a good thing, and they write good code, and they have good technology, and I love that they try to open source and share things where and when they're possible. Frankly, when you understand that our differences are values as opposed to differences of personality or character, then it's much easier to collaborate with them and others like that where and when it makes sense. But you never compromise your values, because once you do that, you lose everything. There's no point to follow this. Isn't it a funny thing that we went from nothing with Bitcoin, January 3rd of 2009. Nobody cared about us, nothing. There was literally just a single person. And we grew to a colossal movement where a guy in Mongolia who raises camels can own Bitcoin. And that was all done based upon principles and values. And now we have people entering our industry saying, yeah, well, that worked then, but it's not going to work anymore. You have to now completely cave in and say, yes, sir, to the man. It's patronizing. It's an amazing statement. And everybody who carries that opinion, they just don't get who we are and why we're here. This is about the people that come after us, not us.